Welcome to Love, Business, and Luggage, where relationships, careers, and adventures take off. I'm Clayton, a cybersecurity guy that loves to follow Monica around with heavy luggage.
That's the truth.
It is.
And I'm Monica. I'm a family nurse practitioner, an owner of the best primary care office in all of Central Texas, and I have a serious travel problem.
Problem? Yeah, I would define it as that for sure. Well, hey, what brought us together today to talk to you about is we're going to talk a little bit about building a business without breaking your marriage. Certainly something that we have a lot of experience in, and especially with Monica. So before we get into how we make this whole marriage and business thing work, let's rewind just to understand how this business even came to be. So let's start with you, Monica, real quick. How did Impact Family Wellness start? When did you learn what the word entrepreneurship actually meant, and how did we get there? So let's start with, where's the start of this, and what was your why to even look at it?
Yeah, to be honest, it all started with a Facebook ad. Clickbait got me hardcore. We, back in 2018, knew that we were going to be relocating to Texas in 2019. And I had done a lot in the world of healthcare, from primary care to ortho, all sorts of things. So I was really trying to figure out what was I going to do when I got to Texas. And of course, I think my phone listened to me, and it sent me a Facebook ad that said, primary care physician takes home $400,000 a year and is home in time for dinner. Immediately, I knew it was a lie. And so I clicked on it because primary care's my passion, but it is exhausting in the insurance-based world because you have to see 30 patients a day. So I dove into this clickbait, and it was all about starting a direct primary care office, which is a membership form of healthcare that I had never heard of.
Yeah.
And so I did a bunch of research and lots of YouTube videos, other podcasts, info all over the internet. And I went to my lovely husband and I said, "Dear husband, I am going to open a practice," which, first of all, should have been the first red flag. Because
you had actually said that you would never open your own practice. These were words that came out of your mouth many times.
Yes. But I was going to open my own practice where I could see less patients, take better care of them, have more control of my time, and make the same amount of money.
And this is where I don't think I actually put the hand up in your face to say, stop right there. This isn't possible, but it was darn near close to that body language.
Fairly sure you laughed in my face.
I don't think
that's
laughed
how
in
I
the face.
remember
No,
it.
yeah, I think
That's
you remember it wrong, but we can keep going.
You and your MBA loving ways were like, "Monica, that sounds great, and you can probably have like 3 of those things, but you can't have all 4.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh wait, but I can, Clay." So I Googled how to write a business plan, and then, because ChatGPT wasn't around then, I actually had to do it, and went to you, my dear husband, and said, "Dear husband, remember that idea I had? Well, here it is on paper. I was really just planning to give myself a job, but I needed $20,000, and I was not going to get paid for at least 6 months."
Yeah. No, that's exactly how it went down. And so she shared with me this business plan. And, one of the things that I was just struck by was, as I was going through everything that she had so cogently put down on paper, it was that the healthcare system is just so dramatically broken. And she was able to exhibit that in a way that, having lived it along with her, I guess I understood that it was broken. I just didn't realize how broken it was. For instance, I think one of the things that stuck out with me is within the business plan, you were talking about how going direct for certain blood tests was dramatically cheaper than even my insurance-based price. And I was working at a company that had really remarkable insurance at the time. And so I think this just kind of pointed out all the inefficiencies, and I started to see the vision that you set really through that business plan. So I think it's important for people to understand, certainly we've kind of gotten the what, but the why. Like, why was this so important to you to look at maybe stepping? Because look, you had been well paid, you'd had really good jobs, you were very good at family practice, you'd done orthopedics and some other things. Why was this so attractive to you?
The main attraction was the fact that I could do what I went to school for 9 years to do, and that was to take care of people again.
Right.
Because our system doesn't allow healthcare providers to provide healthcare. We provide sick care that is basically in the form of documentation and rules and restrictions of what insurance companies will let us do and what we can't do. And I went to school to take care of people and also to build relationships. I'm a very strong relationship person. And that's really what I love about my job. Sure, is, curing people and making them feel better a good thing, but sure, it's great. But my ultimate love of my job is building relationships. And I was not able to do that seeing 30 patients a day. I was treating my patients like cattle and seeing how quickly I could write them a prescription to get them out the door. And it just wasn't fulfilling me anymore. And I was exhausted from doing paperwork. And I'll tell you, I was good at doing paperwork.
Yeah.
I was really good at cutting people off. I was typically home at least decently on time. Sometimes I had some charts to finish, but for the most part, I was pretty good at it, but it was exhausting.
I think I'll interject in here and say, I often talk about, what fills your cup, what drains your cup, right? And so when we would talk at night, what filled Monica's cup wasn't, hey, I saw 25 patients today, right? What filled her cup was she had this opportunity to help a patient, to really invest her time and effort into that patient, and she made a meaningful difference. And so there were kind of two things that I think that you really looked at. One was you wanted a better patient experience with better patient outcomes. Mm-hmm. And you wanted to really create this environment for providers that, I sometimes have kind of politely referred to as Disneyland for providers, but this area where you can still make the money that you need to make to support a family and, to pay for the education that you guys have, but to also allow you to practice medicine in a way that's incredibly fulfilling. And so I think that were some of your whys that we started out with. So we go down this path, right? So we decide, hey, we're going to move to Austin, Texas. And here we come, right? Like, we're going to do this business thing. Monica has decided that we're going to do it. And when I say Monica has decided, I would say I was on board in supporting you. I wouldn't say that I was 100% like, yeah, boy, I just want to open a business. Like, I want to see you get a lease and open a business. So talk to me a little bit about, what were those I'm actually going to do this moment? Like, when did the excitement and the fear kind of come into play?
Yeah, so the idea came about in August, and we weren't going to move till the following June. So there was a lot of time in between, and there was a lot of research being done. And in January, about 4 months later, I left a job with I would say toxic CEO would be the best way to put it. And it kind of gave me the time that I needed to really focus on building my website and doing that sort of thing. But in February, we flew out to Austin to visit your family. That was when we found the space that we were going to lease. And it was right around the corner from the house. It was the perfect size. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the one we really wanted because we weren't going to move till June, and it was a whole thing. But really, it was when we saw that lease and the personal guarantee that said, if you don't make this work, you will personally pay for this space for the next 3 years, regardless of if you're using it or not.
Yeah, 100%. I did the math immediately in my head to know, what was if Monica does this for 6 months and it just doesn't work out, what's our damage? And that probably, looking back, that probably was not the most supportive way. I don't know if I verbalized that to you. I don't recall at the time, but it certainly wasn't the most supportive way to look at it. But that was kind of my mentality of just protecting our family, supporting you, protecting our family, understanding what the maximum damage that could happen. And boy, was I wrong, because it took off.
There was a lot going on at that time, though, too, is I was leaving my paycheck to move to a new house that we had to pay for. Our son was graduated from high school, about to go to college. Our other son was 3. There was so many moving things, so many moving parts at the time that starting a business probably was not the best of ideas. But now in hindsight, it was great. But I also think that it's one of those things, there's never a perfect time. It's like having children.
Sure.
There's never the perfect time to start a business, to have kids. Is it time to get married? I don't know. The perfect time never comes. And so we just made it work. But yeah, signing that lease was one of those, we can't go back on this, right? I could always go get another job.
Sure.
I could always do those things, but we were in on this lease for 3 years, whether we liked it or not.
Well, and I think the other part that we should point out is that we were incredibly naive on some of this too. We'd never started a business before.
Yeah, it turns out I didn't know what the word entrepreneur meant.
Yeah.
Even a year before I became one.
A year prior to that, yeah.
So Yeah.
One, and the story that I'll tell real quick just to show like how unprepared we were. And I don't think any business owner is really prepared for it until they do it. But there was a period of time where I was part-time living where we come from because our older son was graduating high school. Monica was here in Austin, Texas, launching the business. And of course, she had a 3-year-old at home. And she calls me up one day. She's like, we got to put this kid in daycare. And there had been this plan that she was going to kind of work half time on the business while she built it up and still be able to watch our youngest son. And she just calls me out of the blue one day. She's like, we got to put this kid in daycare. And she was 100% right. This is the thing that I think for any entrepreneur that you've really got to wrap your mind around is when you're in, you're in. It's 100% of your time and effort. It's not to say you can't have a family life, but this was a more than 8 to 5 job. This was not something where she could also be giving a 3-year-old the attention that he needs.
Yeah, definitely not. Daycare for the win.
Yeah, for sure. So we open this business, right? And I think that the thing that listeners really want to hear about is, how do we work together? How has that evolved over the past, 6 years? So maybe I should talk a little bit about my role then versus my role now. And I'd love to hear your perspective if you agree with this. So, my role...
Let's hear what you got.
Let's hear what I have to say, right? So my role in the beginning was an advisor, I guess. Certainly I had more of the business education. I didn't have experience standing up businesses. I've always been the technical guy. So, that's something that hasn't changed throughout. But I would say that we were having conversations on most of the decisions that were happening in the business then. And some of it was, Monica was paying her own tuition as an entrepreneur, learning the business as time went on. Now, how that has definitely morphed over time was, and I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a bit when there's a pivotal moment when this kind of transition happens. Monica goes from needing me to comment on the business of the day to sometimes just needing me to be support and to maybe help her with the bigger decisions. So that transition from being involved in, I don't want to say involved in the day-to-day, but involved in the small decisions to, as she has matured as a business owner, which happened incredibly quickly, I have to tell you. But as that has kind of transitioned, I needed a lot less except for the big strategic type decisions. And even then, my role is still that of an advisor. My role is not the one to make the decision. And it's something that, we really had to figure out for ourselves is that I can't part-time be in the business and try to tell her the decisions should be made. This is her business. She needs to be the one that makes those decisions.
Yeah, I have to agree. I would say in the beginning, most things, unless they were medically related, I would pass by you, especially tech things from all the IT things, website stuff, domain names, getting logos, all of these sorts of things. I had no idea what I was doing. And so a lot of those early decisions were mutual decisions where we would talk about them. Now it's a different story 6 years later.
Absolutely.
But I was very naive. I had no idea what I was doing, which was very honestly difficult for me because I've always been in places where I feel like I'm pretty strong. I know healthcare pretty well, and I've been living it for 10 years. And so to go from feeling pretty strong in what you do to having no idea what you're doing was quite the transition. Some people ask like why Clay doesn't work in the business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's for a couple of reasons. One, I think you would hate me by the end of the day.
I don't think that's true at all. I really don't. But I know we've certainly had spouses that have told us, that they can't work together. Monica and I have never really tried that. So I don't want to presume that I know. I mean, there's a part of me that feels like we could, but if we did, there'd be a discussion to be had about what those roles look like so we don't step on each other's toes. And luckily, business is where we cross over. Obviously, technology, I got that. Medical stuff, I should not be telling her anything to do with medicine. That's just not fair. But, I do think that that's an area. But to your question, really, why didn't we start the business together? Frankly, I admire couples that can start a business together and really jump off that diving board into the deep end. In our case, the financial stability of me continuing to work for a corporation, I think that led us, that gave us
huge.
Yeah, it gave us some time. It gave you some space. You didn't have to feel stressed because we knew where the mortgage was going to get paid from.
Right. Well, I'm an overachiever as it is. And it was stressful enough to open this practice with knowing that if I didn't make a ton of money right off the bat, that it would still be okay. Thankfully, because of the career I have, I could have always gone back and gotten a regular job for an insurance-based world and sold my soul to the devil. But it was incredibly helpful to me knowing that we weren't relying on my income, that it was only going to be the icing on top when it got there.
Yeah, and it did get there. And I think if you're thinking about owning a business, I think we watched a reality show this weekend, which we'll talk about in a few episodes. But it was referred to that revenue is the scoreboard. The only thing that I'll say, I don't disagree with the revenue as a scoreboard, but the take home that you bring home is not the accurate scoreboard. There are many benefits, and I'm sure we'll cover it in a future episode. There are many benefits to owning a business, things that will never show up on a tax return. And I'm not saying that to say that there's some gray area here. It's just there are benefits to Monica owning a business that are impossible for us to really put up on the scoreboard that have worked out. So her contribution to our family, and I'm talking really more financial, it's not just measured in the amount of take home, but also one thing that we didn't, or at least I didn't think about, was the part of the planning of our retirement and how business could play such a huge role in this. So when we talk about the business, we're also talking about this future revenue generating business that we could have that we hadn't even thought about that 6 years ago. Like, this was really just a way, and I think this is an important point. When you started the business, you didn't try to start a business. You were looking for a job.
I was giving myself a job. And just to be clear, there is a very big difference between giving yourself a job and building a business. Those are two very different things. And in the beginning, it was just to give me a job. And I was 100% on board with that. And it just kind of morphed and kept growing into being a business. Now, that to say, if you want to give yourself a job that is starting a business, and that is 100% okay. But it is definitely not what I expected to do. If you had told me 6 years ago that I would not be seeing patients anymore, that I would just be the CEO, I would have probably laughed in your face. So I'm interested to see what 5 years from now brings us.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, so one thing that we've definitely learned through this process is communication. Mm-hmm. We are both very good communicators in our own fashion. And I mean, we've been married for 11 years, together for 14 at this point. But I will tell you, building a business really taught us how to communicate even better. Yeah. And one thing we learned kind of the hard way was to be very clear when you are bringing an issue, concern, or topic to your spouse about business. You need to be very clear about what your intention of the conversation is.
Yeah.
And we learned this, that we need to clarify whether I need you to listen.
Yep.
I want you to fix something, or I just need to let you listen to me vent, right? Yeah. Because the reaction I get back is very different in those ways. And if I don't tell you what I'm looking for, then I get the wrong thing. And I think early on it wasn't that big of a deal because I felt like I was always coming to you to fix my problems. But then when I started coming to you with my problems that I just wanted you to listen, that's where I was like, just shut up and say it's going to be okay. Right. All right?
Well, I think you're right. There was that, and again, this goes back to, there's that transition period. There was that point where you really did want to use me as a sounding board for every decision. And it was because it was new, right? And it was something that you hadn't experienced. But as time went on, you leapfrogged me in that. You knew your business better than I could ever know your business. Like, I remember one of the first times that you came to me and started talking about your financials. And I was just like, I was so proud of you on one hand, because I was like, oh my gosh, she understands financials. But like, let's deal with the side that isn't as pretty. As I was also a little sad that she didn't need me as much anymore, and frankly, and we can talk about this some too, also a little envious, and there were times where I really had to myself deal with that. She got to go do this thing that she was so passionate about, and I'm so proud for her on one hand, and on the other hand, I'm like, gosh, I wish I could be doing that same thing. But to your point about knowing, about being very clear in how and what you're bringing to me, or vice versa, I think I'm going to really overgeneralize here, but I think many men, especially, I'm sure some women as well, but many men, we are problem solvers. We see it as our role, especially for our spouses, to go and solve their problems. And I think it's a really great point that Monica makes, is to say, hey, that's not why I'm coming to you this time. I'm coming to you because I need emotional support. I need to be heard. I don't need you to fix my problem. Because it's really frustrating for Monica if she comes to me and she really just wants a shoulder to cry on, so to speak. And I'm talking about, well, if we put it in a spreadsheet, we can totally fix this thing. Let's use AI to tell us the answer. That's not what she needed at that moment. She can figure out the answer. That's not why she's coming to me. She's coming to me because she needs to vent. She needs to get it out. She needs to hear herself be able to kind of work through that. And I just need to be the one that's going to, give her the pat on the shoulder and say, hey, you got this, right? And I think that in marriage, that's a very critical skill to have, that it took a business for us, I think, to really fine tune and learn it. But even if you don't own a business, even if you're not starting a business, just think about that, using that in your everyday communication. Be very clear on what I want from this conversation.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, as much as Clayton and I get along, we have also had our battles. Especially early on, I was incredibly, and I still am, I'm very much an optimist.
Yes.
I will say yes to anything. Anybody wants to come sell me something, I am like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Yes, let's do that. Yes, let's do this. And then the other side of the coin is not so much.
Yeah, no, look, I've been in business long enough. I worked in sales, which, you see the good and bad in business all the time. And so I've been burned. I can think of some, very early in my career, in fact, we were burned by a company, or by an individual who committed some fraud, and we ended up sending them like $40,000 worth of product. It was a small company. It really hurt the company bad. But it was those sorts of things. They kind of mold who you are. So what we've got here is we've got the optimist and the skeptic. And the beauty in that is when we come together, we really kind of find the true meaning. But what it has meant is there's been some eye rolls from me. Like, why did you take that meeting? Like, why are you entertaining that? But then on the other side, there's been times where maybe you were so optimistic that you were kind of pie-eyed and didn't see the danger in what you were doing. And I've been able to point that out. There's some advantages in both. And I think that it's worthwhile for us to talk about some of those.
Yeah. Once upon a time, there was a gentleman, a physician in the area, who had a similar business plan to mine, but incorporated it into an emergency room situation. And he basically wanted me to crumble my business into his. But he wasn't explaining it that way. And
he wasn't explicit about it at all. He was definitely trying to work around that situation. Yeah.
For sure. And so he seemed a little bit shady. And so I will say that my gut intuition there was good. And so I brought you along on this business meeting with this physician. And before we even left, he went to grab a water or something. And you looked at me and you were like, why are we talking to this guy?
It was clear to me that, and I've seen this in business, there are times when people see someone that they think that they can take advantage of, or they think they can get a leg up. And again, some people see business as very binary, win or lose. And in this circumstance, I really felt like he was essentially trying to acquire Monica's business without giving her compensation for it and without calling it that, hoping that he could get one over on her. So, we were able to find that. But there's the other side of this, right? There's the other side where Monica has entertained specifically one startup that I'm thinking of that, I wouldn't have even taken their phone call, honestly. And they turned out to be a huge boom for your business. They've custom developed some software. Now they've commercialized it, which is awesome. They've used you as kind of a sounding board to help the whole industry by developing some things that are really beneficial. I would have never taken that phone call. I would have seen it being a waste of my time. I would have been so skeptical about their intentions that I wouldn't have taken it. And that would have been a mistake. So, I think that's where your optimism really kicks in.
Yeah. definitely a checks and balances that seems to work. This episode is brought to you by Thrive Market, the online grocery store that actually makes healthy living easy and affordable. From pantry staples to clean wine, yes please, Thrive has it all, delivered straight to your door. And guess what? As a special treat for our listeners, you can get 40% off your first order when you use the link in the show notes. Go check it out. Your pantry and your wallet will thank you. There's also been times where I have made a decision in the business that you didn't necessarily agree with, and I knew you weren't going to agree with it. You had made it very clear, and it had to do with a hiring situation.
Sure.
And to be honest, I was scared crapless to tell him I had made this decision, even though I had already made it, because I knew he disagreed with it. But I knew deep down that I felt I was correct in making this decision.
It was the right decision for your business, and I think that's something we really need to talk about there for just a second, for your business, because it is your business. And even when we've interviewed employees since that time, I've made it very clear when we talk to an employee, if I'm in the room, I make it very clear, look, this is Monica's business. I'm here for support. I'm here for technical stuff, but you need to trust me when I say, well, she makes the decisions in this. But
yeah, and I definitely made a decision, but I did not tell Clayton about it. And he kind of found out in a roundabout way and then was real not happy with it.
I was not happy.
And not happy because I had made the decision necessarily, but because I hid it from him. And so we definitely learned from that.
Yeah, we had some really frank conversations that, this is where, again, podcast is about not just business, but about love. Like we learned something about ourselves that day, and we haven't, at least I don't think we haven't made this same mistake. And that is, look, sometimes there's truth telling. Sometimes you've got to tell your spouse something that you don't want to tell them. But in that case, I wasn't upset that you made the decision, like you said. I was upset that you didn't tell me, and that you specifically, you kind of, like you said, you hid it from me, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't like that I had to find it out by not coming directly from you. And so, look, we talked about that, and we really kind of came to the table and said, the reason why I'm mad is not the decision that you made. It's the fact that you didn't tell me and you didn't trust me. You didn't trust my reaction. Now, on the other side of that, if I'm going to be really truthful, it was probably because I had not handled the conversations at that point very well. I had not been open to your ideas, and I had been fairly black and white on this thing. It's either no or it's a yes. There is no gray. There is no conversation. And so I learned something about that. That was also, and I don't think we've ever put this into words, it was also a bit of a turning point where it was like, okay, this is really her business now. I am truly now an advisor. I am not a person that's making decisions. And, I think for spouses out there, that can be kind of a tough thing to come away with when it's because it's a couple things. It's one, I don't have that opportunity to do that, which would have been kind of cool, even though I can't come up with a business that I really want to start in big time. But it was also it feels good to be wanted sometimes, or needed, I guess is the word. And I wasn't as needed anymore. And so we learned a lot about ourselves through that experience, and we learned how to communicate even when it's the bad stuff. And let's take this into smaller, even when it's I make a mistake and buy something that I should have never bought, something like that. Now, at least instead of trying to hide it somewhere, at least I can come and tell her I screwed up. And we've got that relationship where we can bring it to each other. We can talk about it, and we can be open about it, even if it is, I disagree with it. So I think that we learned a lot from that.
Absolutely. It's amazing how much having a open communication and the ability to communicate completely changes your life, your business, your marriage, your travel, all of it.
Yeah. So 6 years in business now, Monica. How have you evolved since that time? Would you even recognize the person, the entrepreneur that sat in front of, would have sat here 6 years ago? Would you have recognized that woman?
No, not at all, honestly. I have changed in so many ways, not only in my optimism. I'm still very optimistic, but I'm a bit more cautious. But I also used to let people walk all over me, where I was just trying to get anyone in the door. Anybody who wanted to come to my practice, absolutely, come on in. I will take any customer. And now I realize not all customers are fit for my practice.
Yeah, they're not all created equal.
And so I am like a mama bear now, especially for my staff. I will do anything to protect my staff. Just because you're a customer does not mean you get to disrespect anyone on my staff. And that's from the administrative staff up to the nurse practitioners. Like, they all deserve respect. And I still to this day, I hate conflict, but I'm much better at dealing with it.
Sure.
I've learned that I don't have to make everyone like me, which is still very difficult for me. But I've tried so hard to make the world love Monica in every way. And now the older I get, the more I realize, like, that's not what's important. And I can't make everyone love me. And so I have a business to run. I have 10 people who rely on a paycheck to run their lives. And that lies on my shoulders.
Yeah, and you're a lot more protective of your time. I think that's something that I've really noticed. Like you said, you'd let pretty much anyone come in, you take any phone call, but you've started to learn that you have value to your time. And this is something that's a relatively new phenomena. You even now charge consulting for some of your time when other business owners want to start their business. And that's not a greedy thing. That's just a matter of saying, my time is valuable. I can be spending it other places and I need a return on this. So yeah. I really applaud for the things that you've learned. What I've learned is how to be more supporting, and it extends really beyond just the business, but the business is what I think accelerated that, how to be supporting, when to answer problems or when to help with problems, but when to just, be that, I keep saying shoulder to cry on. It's not Monica cries a lot, but, being the understanding partner. Mm-hmm. And it's also allowed me to be a lot more transparent with her. So it really does go both ways when I say, hey, look, I'm really frustrated at work and I need to talk about it. Now we have that language to communicate that. So I think I'd like to leave people with, there's a few lessons that we've kind of spoken about. So the first thing is not every spouse needs to be a co-founder. You don't have to start a business together per se. You can definitely go and have one person start a business. That's not to say that couples starting a business together is necessarily a bad idea, but I do think that it's an idea that you need to discuss. Is this something where we both need to be involved?
Well, and I think regardless of if you're involved in the actual day-to-day business stuff, the support that is needed from the non-business associated spouse is obscene.
Yeah.
Because I used to text you every single time I got a new patient. Every one of them. Yep. I would send you a text. Oh my gosh, somebody else signed up. Somebody else signed up.
There were a lot of animated GIFs going back and forth.
It was insane. And then you also were there when I was like, oh my gosh, I lost 3 people today. And it was like...
To be clear, they didn't die. They just left our practice.
They just left. But it was so heartbreaking to me when I would lose patients. But you were there to help celebrate the successes, which I think people don't do enough of. And if that's one thing I can leave you with from this episode, is you have to enjoy the journey, because we, especially in America, we set goal upon goal upon goal. As soon as I got to one goal, before I celebrated it, I was going to the next goal.
Yeah.
And so I think we really have to make sure that we celebrate all the little things, but also know that you're going to have to be there when I do need that shoulder to cry on. Yeah. When I come home super pissed off because some patient did something terrible, or when I come home because my patient did in fact pass away. Yeah. And so,
which has happened, unfortunately. Yeah.
Whether you are the business owner or the spouse or the best friend or the sister of that business owner, they're going to need your support for all the highs and lows. So you're in it whether you want to be or not.
The other thing that I'll say is that just because I don't own a business, you've never demeaned the problems that I have, and to say that somehow they're less because I don't own a business, or because people aren't responsible. I'm not responsible for their paycheck. So, I really appreciate that about you. So, Monica, as we move forward, we have a segment that we love to do here, which is what's in your carry-on. So, Monica, what's in your carry-on right now?
I will tell you, I am a passport
control freak.
Control freak is a great way to describe that. So I not only hold our passports, I only hand them out when we are going through security or going to actually board the plane. And then you have to give me your passport back before you get on the jet bridge and before you put your shoes back on after you've gotten through security. I will take them.
So those of you listening right now may be thinking she's talking about our 10-year-old, or that she's just talking about her 10-year-old, our 10-year-old and myself. No, she's talking about anytime we travel with anyone, she becomes the person that's responsible for the passports.
Anyone who's in my family, and this includes my 24-year-old son and his fiance, if they travel abroad with us, I keep everyone's passport. And then there's sometimes when I mess it up. Only once.
Only once, and I got a really phenomenal train ride of the German countryside.
So we went to Germany last year for Christmas to do Christmas markets, and we were taking trains from town to town. And we arrived in Munich, and as we got off the train, I realized that I had left the passports in the safe in the hotel back in Nuremberg, which was about an hour and 45-minute train ride. Also, might I add, it was Christmas Eve. And so the hotel was only open until 2 p.m.
Yeah.
And it was 11 a.m. So I had to quickly book you a train ride back to Nuremberg to get our passports. And thankfully it worked out. But I will never live that one down.
No,
I will take it to my grave.
That's not true. But we will certainly talk about being flexible when we travel in a future episode. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us. This has been a lovely conversation talking about entrepreneurship and a relationship. So I think the biggest insight that I think we should be sharing with the listeners out there is you've got to learn to communicate if you're going to do this. It's a big commitment for the couple to have a business. And so I think that's really exciting. Monica, what are we bringing for episode 3?
Next time, we are comparing healthcare and cybersecurity. And shockingly, there's actually more in common than you think.
And one is much cooler than the other, but we will leave that for the next episode to debate that out. So everyone, I'm Clayton. This is Monica. You're listening to Love, Business, and Luggage. Please find us wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure that you like us, you subscribe to us. And you know what? If you're enjoying it, tell a friend, tell a family member. Until next time, thanks everyone.